All right, so what we're going to do is take a look at launching our first service. So a service allows you to attach a static IP address and also can do load balancing to multiple pods that it selects. And so what I'm going to do here is go to the top and we'll type in service Kubernetes because most of the code is here. We can just tweak it. I always like to show you where I'm grabbing the code from. So here's defining a service. And so this is an example of one. But we want ClusterIP. If we scroll on down here, I mean, that one up there is ClusterIP, but I'm just trying to see if they actually have a very specific one for ClusterIP. No, okay, so that one up there is ClusterIP. Okay, so we'll go back to the top. I'm going to go ahead and grab on this one here, and we'll go back over here, and I'm going to create in our folder here a new file. I'm going to call this one service clusterip.yaml. We'll double click into this and we'll go ahead and paste that on in there. And so one thing is that we will need metadata. So the metadata name will be the name that shows up when we do get services. So I'm just going to type in service cluster IP. And then we need our selector. So I'm actually going to leave the selector incorrect. So I'm going to go here and do Sinatra. I'm going to go over here and see what this is called. So this one is called Sinatra. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to call it Sinatra. And then down below we have the port. So TCP is great. Port 80 is the port that we want to access within the cluster. So we'll say 8080. And the target port is 4567. So very similar to when we were doing port forwarding, right? Which technically probably was creating a service and also proxy at the same time. And then down below here, are we still in this environment? I'm just type exit if we didn't exit BusyBox there, and we'll just type in clear. And so a few too many tabs here. I'll close the first one. I don't care about that tab. But so the idea here is that we will provision or deploy the service. And so we should be, if we're within the cluster, access that port 80, the pod via port 8080. So what we'll do here is type in micro K8s. And we'll type in kubectl, and then we will type in apply -f K8s service cluster IP address. Now, notice I didn't actually specify a kind, and I just kind of want to point that out before we proceed forward, because notice these ones have, there's like a kind option here. And so normally you're supposed to do, maybe it's not there. Let's go down to node port will be an example that shows us here. I'm just trying to find the code example. So under type for spec, it would be here. Okay, so if we go under here and we set cluster IP, okay, that's how you know it's cluster IP. But if you don't specify, it will automatically be cluster IP. So even if we don't have this here, we delete it out, it's still cluster IP. And this should be two space tabs. Otherwise, we're gonna have a lot of trouble here. And what we'll do is hit enter, okay? And so it created the service. And so we can type in micro K8s, kubectl get svc services. And so notice here that we have our service cluster IP. It's showing us its cluster IP type, and it has a cluster IP address. So this service now has a static IP address of 10, 152, 183, and 8, and any pods that are associated with this, like that are linked through them, is going to be accessed through this static IP address that's never going to change. Okay, we can terminate pods all day and they will be the same. And so you can see that it's for port 8080. Okay, so that's the port that we're going to need it on. But the question is, did we properly select the pods? And so one way we can tell is if we were to go ahead and type in details. So if we go micro K8, or sorry, describe, and then go service, and then put the service name here, we can get some additional information. That was describe. It is describe. I'm probably spelling it wrong. Describe, maybe services. Oh, you know what? I'm forgetting kubectl here. Kubectl. Okay, and so we get some information. So it's in the default namespace. Notice it shows labels none, annotations none, selectors name Sinatra, cluster IP, single stack, IPv4. That's its IP address. But notice down below here, it says endpoints none. So in the course, we'd say that endpoints is the way a service links to pod or pods. And if there are no endpoints, then that's an indicator that this service is not selecting the proper pods. And so there's probably a mistake with our selector, which there is. I purposely did that because I wanted to show you that endpoint. Now, what I want to do is I want to now go back to our BusyBox example that we had earlier. So I'm just hitting up to grab that. And if you want to find it again, you just type in service debug Kubernetes and get that link. And so we'll enter in here. Whoops. Did you specify the right host or port? Oh yeah, sorry. Micro K8's in the front again. So we'll go ahead and enter here. And so theoretically, what we should be able to do is use the cluster IP address, right? And type in wget and do 8080, and it should be able to download that page. But notice it says can't connect to remote host because it's not linking to anything. Okay, so we'll go ahead here and type exit. We'll type clear just to clean things up here. And what I need to do is I need to update this because this is incorrect. So there's a couple ways that we can update this. We can just change this and do an apply, or we can use the, I'm trying to remember the name of the command, because usually I'll just update it and apply it, but it's, oh, I can't remember. Let's go take a look here. So we say kubectl commands. It's in the course. We got viewing, updating, not replace, patching. So probably with a patch, we could probably do it. So I rarely ever run patches, but let's give it a go and see if that works. If not, we'll just update it the old way, or the way that I like to do it. But what we'll do here is type in micro K8s, kubectl, patch, and then probably the service name. So we'll say service, and then it's called service cluster IP. Just to make sure, I'm going to go here and type in SVC so I can see the name. Yeah, it's service cluster IP. If I just made a spelling mistake, I'm just double checking. We'll hit enter. And it says must specify patch or patch file containing. So we'll just say patch. Okay, that didn't work as I thought. That shows you how often I do patches here, but oh, here goes -p. Okay, so basically patch, what you can do is kind of change the value here. So to do -p and then provide JSON. I guess we could do it that way. It's not as clean as I'd like, but I guess we'll see here. So, I mean, the other way is probably edits, but it's not great to edit things on the fly. Let's try patch for fun. Okay. So just to make this a bit easier, what I'm going to do is go over here, and this is the actual proper selector that we need. Now, you know, it's too much work. We're just going to do an apply, because I'll do this in another video where I'll show you how to do patch properly, just because it's kind of a pain. So I'll do -f, and we'll do K8's service cluster IP. It says it's unchanged. Oh, because we never updated anything. Okay, so what we'll do is copy this, because this is actually the way we're going to select it. And we'll go back here and then paste this on here. Oops, in here. And so now we will then go apply that. And if we go back over to here and we do get CVS, okay, and then we go describe CVS service cluster IP. We got to spell it right if we want it to work. We can now see that there is an endpoint. All right, and so that should suggest that it's now pointing to the correct pod. Let's go take a look at the pods and see if there's any new information there. So get pods O-wide. And so notice that it says that the IP address is 10.1.22.13. So if we go up here and look at the cluster IP, its IP address is 10.152.8. But notice that this is the endpoint. So this one is going to point to this endpoint, okay? So it doesn't matter that this IP address is not the same as the cluster IP, because it will be, because it'll just forward this when we access it through the service. So what we'll do is go back over to here, and we'll hit up until we hit micro K8's kubectl, and we start our BusyBox. And so this time, what we'll do is go ahead and grab the cluster IP address, which is this one here. And we'll go ahead and paste this in. We'll do 8080. We'll do wget. And notice to download the page. And so we'll just do cat index.html. Okay, and so that's showing that we're able to access that that pod through the service cluster. Okay, so that allows other pods to be able to communicate with a static IP address, which is really useful. So we'll type in exit, and we'll type in clear. And so that's pretty much all there is for the cluster IP. Now, I do want to show you expose, because expose is a easier way or just a one-liner of being able to launch a service. So I'll type in kubectl service command, and we'll see if we can get some kind of examples here. And type in expose. And so create a service for, this is replicated Nginx, and it should be easier than that. Yeah, replicate, that's for replication. So we should be able to do it for deploy. So let's see if we can try to do this running this one command here, because that's what a service is doing, is exposing pods by giving it a static IP and giving it a point of entry. So what we'll do is go back over here, and I'm going to hit up until we get to our SVCs. And what I want to do is go ahead and destroy this or delete this. So we'll type in micro K8s, kubectl, delete SVC, paste, and then we'll go back up here, make sure that it's gone. It is gone. And I want to try this micro K8s kubectl expose. So it's going to be expose. And what do we want to expose? We want to exploit a deployment. And so we'll need to know what our deployment is called. It's actually just called Sinatra. So I can just type in Sinatra. Sinatra. And looking at our cheat sheet here. Okay, so it's going to be whatever it is. So this is a replication controller or set or whatever. And so then it's the name, and so the port and the target port. That's what we want to adjust here. So we'll paste that in. And so our port is the port that we want it to be on the cluster. And then it is the port that we're listening to for the container or the pod, which is 4567. So if we hit enter and we go back up here and hit up, we will see now that we have a service called Sinatra. So it didn't change the name. It probably is a flag for name. I'm not sure what it would be. But the idea here is that it has a service here with a cluster IP here. And so we should be able to access our pod the same way. So we'll go back over to this one on the left-hand side. We'll go back and launch our busy box. And what we'll do is go ahead and grab this IP address here. And actually, before we do that, let's go and do a describe on this. I'm just hitting up to find it from before, and we'll type in Sinatra. And notice that it's pointing the endpoint to 10.1.22.13. And its IP address is this. And so we'll go take a look at our pod again, or pods with the -o wide. And notice that is the IP address over here. So it definitely is working properly. But just for fun in our busy box, we'll just triple check here to make sure. So I'm grabbing the IP address of the service, and we'll type in wget paste, and we'll do 8080. Notice that it downloads. If we cat it, index.html, it shows the contents of that file. So we'll type in clear, we'll exit busy box. And so that's just another way. And so expose can be done, with any other one. So if you want to do node port as well, I think you just put the flag kind -kind. But I prefer to do it always through the YAML files, because then we can take that code and commit it to our repository and have infrastructure as a code or what have you there, which I think is just a lot easier to do. But anyway, we'll go back to our services here, and I just want to go ahead and delete this one here. So we will type in micro K8s kubectl delete SVC Sinatra. And I've seen some people where they literally just have to type in K and then, delete SVC. But, just for us, we're just going to be typing it over and over again. But that's okay, because then you will know it by heart, and you'll pass your exam, no problem, by being able to remember all these commands. But anyway, so that was ClusterIP, and I guess we'll move on to node port next, okay?